Welcome to the Friendly Moms Club podcast with Jen and Karlee. We're the new mom friends you didn't know you needed.
We are creating a safe space to bring moms together, lighten the heaviness, and find joy in the everyday moments. Together, we will share our own experiences of being new moms while navigating the topics we wish more people talked about.
Join us every Monday to hear us skip the small talk and dive right into the uncomfortable.
Good morning. Happy Mom Day.
Happy Mom Day, Jen. Welcome back to the potty. It's like party, but it's a pod.
I'm excited to be back.
Oh, I didn't say if it was a beautiful or not so beautiful day, but obviously it's a beautiful day because we're back together.
That is true.
Virtually,
beautiful in spirit, because in person it's pouring rain and it's really not lovely outside.
Yeah, it's not
but
so
we
pretty,
have had a nice week, which was very nice.
The way we determine whether it's a beautiful day is so much more of what is going on in our weeks, in our lives. And I think we both have positive updates right now. So I don't know if you want to
get together yesterday.
Yeah. Little baby ball.
And it's always nice. Yeah. When we hang out with we say babies, like a baby party, baby get together, but they're all toddlers now.
They're toddlers.
So
I know. I don't want to admit it.
But it always makes my heart very happy when I get to see all the mums and babies together. And like, you just see all the changes in them. And now that we've seen everyone since being babies, like fairly young to a year, getting close to a year and a half now, is just, it's so cool to see all the changes, like all the relationships that have developed between all the mums. Like, it's fun. I like it.
Definitely. I think what has changed the most between all of us is, well, not us, but between the baby/toddlers is that they were all pretty like low-key babies, always kind of like were happy when we were out and about. And now they're full-on toddlers. They all have moods and they're like, they got their toddler moods. And then also some of them, not all of them, have decided that food is not as exciting as it used to be. And it's interesting seeing all of their babies kind of becoming more selective with what they're eating and having their own opinions. Yep. So they're definitely opinionated little people now. And you know what?
Well, yeah, you get to see like their attitudes, like the little sassiness, and a lot of them have. Like they all have their own little personalities now. It's pretty cool.
It's fun. They got twoed. Henry yelled at the lady at Costco the other day because, you know, when you go up with the cart and the cart goes on one side and then you go on the other side, he was sitting in the cart, and usually I take him out, but I was like, you know what? Let's see what he does. Like, I'm right here if I have to get him and he can see me. And it was both Jeff and I there with him. So we sent him on the other side of the till in the cart. He thought it was hilarious. He was smiling at us. And then when at the end, the cashier started putting stuff into the cart, she was getting close to him and he just like looked at her and was like, ah, and like screamed. I was like, sorry, he's in a little bit of a phase right now that if he doesn't like something, he just squeals and screams at the top of his lungs, the way he was doing to Jordan when he was playing with her car and she wanted to join. And I was like, sorry.
They're finding their voices, I guess. I
don't
know.
Yeah, she was okay with it. Yeah. So tell us what's new. Anything new?
Well,
you got baby.
I mean, I have a child now. And it's very weird because I say things like the baby get together and I'm like, oh, wait, no, that's toddlers because I actually have another baby now. Like I need to shift my mindset and I don't react to her name yet. Like we were at the clinic and they called for Peyton, which is what we named her. And I just didn't react because I was like, well, it wasn't Jordan. And I was like, oh, no, Peyton, that's my other child now. Like it's just, it's weird to me. And I haven't quite it hasn't quite clicked that we have two children now. And so at the baby get together, it didn't clue into me that I should bring the baby in for people to see the baby. Like I was just focused on like, no, this is a me and Jordan thing. Like, not who cares about the baby, but I was like, this is me and Jordan. This is the thing we've been doing for over a year now, right? Like, so it hasn't quite, I guess, set in that we are now a family of 4 and we have an actual baby, an actual newborn.
A real live baby. Well, you haven't forgot the baby anywhere. So I think that is a mom win for sure.
Yes.
So speaking of mom wins, why don't you share your mom win of the week? What's something
it's kind of related to the topic of what we're going to talk about today. But I was very proud of myself because breastfeeding has been a journey. And this week we did a weigh-in at Public Health. We got to go. If you don't know public health around here, if you're local, you can just go and the scales there are free to use. So if you want to do weigh-ins and check to see how things are going, it's free. So we went and did that just to get a little progress of how my breastfeeding's been going. And I felt good going into it. And then I saw the number. I was like, oh, okay, that's not too bad. And then I did the math and I was like, crap, we're not in the ideal like 20 to 30 grams a day average. And instead of being super disappointed in that and like mad at myself for my body not working, I was just like, okay, you know what? We just have to improve from here. Like maybe she wasn't feeling good, so her stomach is upset. And like, I was just like, nope, this is okay. I'm going to move forward. Like, what can I do now to move forward? But I didn't let myself kind of have the pity party and the like, this sucks. I'm quitting breastfeeding. I'm done with everything. And I was very proud of myself for that because I didn't rely on my past experience with Jordan to dictate how I reacted. And even my husband was proud of me. He said that I did better than he also thought that I was going to do with that news.
Oh, that's great.
And then 2 days later, she gained a ton of weight and all was well. So,
It just shows that the weight kind of ebbs and flows and you need the big picture.
But I didn't freak out in the moment. So
and that's great. And you know what? That's a win.
That was huge for me.
If I had a prize, I would give it to you right now.
Thank you. What about you? What is your mom win of the week?
Mom win of the week. I was supposed to prepare one and I didn't. But I think that I am going to give myself a high 5 and 5 stars or a gold star for just my approach to motherhood this week. It was my first week back at my first week at my new job and my first week working 5 days a week. And I did a really good job at kind of compartmentalizing work and home life and actually spending a lot of time with Henry and the hubby and actually enjoying it and being present, which is a big change because before I was either working and then I was just kind of in zombie mode. So I was actually able to be present and I like volunteered to go do daycare pickup and then he got kicked out of daycare. But other than that,
for being sick,
we
should clarify. He didn't do anything else.
He didn't get kicked out. He was sick. Yeah, he was sick and got kicked out for having diarrhea, but then he ended up having a really bad cold and stayed home the rest of the week. But yeah, that's my win. I was able to actually mom this week.
I know. And coming home from work and feeling good about family life is not easy. The fact that you're able to compartmentalize the two is 2 thumbs up.
It just shows that this job is a much better fit for me. That's where we're at with that. So let's talk boobies and breastfeeding. So let's talk about our topic today. We're going to talk about breastfeeding. We're going to share some tips on what helped us be successful. And they're kind of like not unusual, but they're different tips. They're not just like you need this and you need to hire this person. They're a little bit more, they're different. You'll have to listen. And
big picture. Yes.
Yeah, big picture. Yes. And then Jen's going to share about her current breastfeeding journey with baby Peyton because it's quite different than it was with her first Jordan.
If you want to hear about our first breastfeeding journeys, it's episode 12. You can listen to that maybe before you listen to this one. It might give you a better picture because we both struggled very differently, but we both really struggled. Mm-hmm. And I ended up formula feeding exclusively. And Karlee trekked through and she was able to exclusively breastfeed. So it was... But we both struggled in very different ways. Mm-hmm. And I think it goes to show that breastfeeding and feeding your child in general, like not even just breastfeeding, feeding your child is a lot. It's mentally taxing, physically taxing. Like it's just, there's so much to it. And I actually told my husband this week, I was like, having major abdominal surgery is easier to me than feeding my child. Like recovering from my C-section is the easy part. This whole figuring out a feeding, what's going to work for our family. Our family looks different than it did when we tried to do this with our first, which also comes into play. There's just so many different factors that I'm like, that's the hard part about this all. Like the actual healing from the C-section is nothing compared to this, in my opinion. It is very hard.
It's different for everybody. Some people have a breeze with breastfeeding. Some people don't. And we're here to remind you that it's okay if you're struggling and just keep listening because we got some hot tips. Now I have to figure out how to wean because I struggled to start breastfeeding for so long. And it took us probably 4 months to like really get the hang of it. And now he's just obsessed. So here we are. Anyways, let's hear about,
And here you are. You thought you were going to wean, I don't even know, a month ago you talked about it on the podcast.
Oh, more than that. It was like this summer.
Yeah. And you were like, I am ready. I am ready to wean. And now we're months later. We are here and you're still like, trekking.
Well, I wanted to wean around the 1 year mark because it was starting to become like stressful and thinking about going back to work. And then it was hard going back to work and having to pump. So then I just cut out some of the pumps and then I stopped pumping. So some days I would breastfeed and some days I wouldn't. So even now, like, I don't know how much he's getting, but like he still really enjoys it. And we don't have like a breastfeeding schedule. He just feeds when he wants to. It's usually if we're out and about, he wants it for comfort. And then before dinner, it kind of seems to be his time. And now I don't even mind because little snack. Now I don't even mind because it's not like something I have to do. It's just like, it's different. Anyways, enough about my boobies. Let's talk about your boobies.
Well, they are huge. Let me tell you. I never experienced this with Jordan. Like, I'm experiencing so many new things that I never experienced the first time, which is cool, I guess, because I've actually enjoyed it. I've enjoyed this stage and I've enjoyed breastfeeding, which I didn't think I ever would. Like, I hated it the first time. It was not good. Didn't get milk supply. Just couldn't work. Everything it was not good. I triple fed, pumped way too much, and I did it for way too long. So going into this, I had originally told, I think, Karlee and a few other people that I wanted to give it a go, but I was going to give myself a short time frame. So every baby is different, and so every baby, you might be able to breastfeed, you might not be. Like, you might get a supply, you might get a big supply, oversupply. Like, every baby is a new chance to start over. Like, you can't
compare. You can't expect that if it was hard with the first, it would be hard with the second.
But like, every new baby is a new, like, you restart your feeding journey. It's a new opportunity So I was trying to just be like, okay, it didn't work the first time. I'll give it a go for 2 weeks. You never know what's going to happen. And I really wanted people to know that so that they could say, like, hey, it's been 2 weeks. Don't do what you did last time and go down that rabbit hole of triple feeding and all of that. So I actually talked to a lactation consultant before I even had the baby. So I kind of had a bit of a game plan going into it. And she agreed with me. 2 weeks was a great time frame. Like, really, by then, we're going to know if it's working or not. So I had told her about that, and so she knew, especially for my mental health, like 2 weeks, like that was a good time frame for us, and she was in the loop for this. So the Coles Notes versions of my feeding journey so far, because it's been a little bit tricky, but as of right now, I'm exclusively breastfeeding. I guess I'll start off with things that I thought actually started off my journey really well, which was at the hospital. The nurse, actually, I was in the recovery from the C-section, and probably within 5 minutes of getting there, the nurse was hand expressing for me. So I was still very out of it and very numb, but she's like, do you mind? I was like, no. And so she just takes the boobs out, and she gets a little bit of colostrum and was feeding it to Peyton. And I was doing skin to skin right away, even when I was recovering. Like, I was still pins and needles everywhere and like barely out of the recovery room, and they were already helping me do this. So I thought that was a really good start. Again, with Jordan, I didn't do any hand expression, any skin to skin, no attempt at feeding or anything for probably like 6 to 8 hours because she went to the NICU, and like no one suggested hand expression. I didn't really realize about it. It just wasn't in my thought process. So this nurse was awesome, and she was just like, let's go. And she was great, and I loved her for that. And in the hospital, feeding was okay, but she was very jaundiced. And so they didn't think she was getting enough because of the jaundice. So I actually did use donor milk when I was in the hospital, and some formula, I should say. I did both. And I supplemented with that just to help because of the jaundice. And in the end, she did good. She didn't lose too much weight, and we were able to go home after only like 36 hours-ish. So it was really nice. Once we were at home, her jaundice actually got worse. And really, I don't know much about jaundice, but my understanding now is that you need to just feed them a lot. Like, they need to process out the bilirubin in their liver, so you need to feed them a lot. So I was breastfeeding like
3 to 5 too. So that's when you were home.
Yeah. So it was when we got home that it peaked, and it got, quite bad. And so, but she was so sleepy because of the jaundice that we were basically doing baby torture to keep her awake. Wet cloths, and I was feeding all the time because she wasn't really eating at each feed. So it felt like she was just on me for 24 hours. And let me tell you, I wanted to give up. I was like, I'm done. Like, this is not, I can't sustain this. Like, this is not okay. Like, I'm not hanging out with my other child because I literally have this baby on me all the time. And how can you sustain that now when you have a toddler? Like, I never thought that my other child was going to come into play in my breastfeeding journey, but it plays a huge part in it because I wanted to be able to spend time with them, have dinners together, still be able to hold and snuggle with her. And if I had the baby on the boob for 24 hours a day, and because I'm still not very good at it, it's a very hands-on experience. I can't just like latch her and then play with my other hand. I'm not there yet. So I basically was just not able to interact with her. And so I was just in tears every day about that. And I was like, you know what? This is not, I was ready to give up. And my husband was like, okay, but we said 2 weeks. And I was like, yeah, no, like, we'll see how it's going to go. So I did end up triple feeding, but only for a few days. And then we wanted to see if my milk would come in. So my milk didn't really improve my supply. Sorry, I got milk, but my supply didn't increase enough. And we dealt with the jaundice. It was getting better. Her blood test that we did for jaundice was good. We didn't have to do the Billy Lights, which was good. So it was working, whatever we were doing. And we were triple feeding and supplementing with formula at that point. After we saw the lactation consultant, we decided in our talks of everything that I was going to try domperidone, which we're not going to get into. I guess I think it's helpful because it's helped me and I know other people it's helped, but there's a bit of a controversy, I guess, depending on who you talk to, if taking this medication is safe to do. I feel like this could be a whole long tangent, but there are medications out there that you could take to try to increase your supply. What do they call it? It's
Galactagon.
It's not marketed.
Oh,
no, it's not marketed.
Off-label. It's off-label.
Off-label. Thank you. Yeah. It's an off-label medication. So it's not marketed to increase your lactation, like to increase your supply.
It's just a side effect, yeah.
It's a side effect of it. So there's lots of doctors who don't want to prescribe it.
And I would just want to add in quickly, there's a lot of misinformation out there as well. I actually, when Jen was telling me about it, I was speaking to some people at work who this is their job, particularly the LC that I work with, a lactation consultant. And she gave me like a few just like important things to know. And the thing that she said is that if you don't see an increase within the first week or two, then it's not going to work for you. And to not keep going up on the dose. Some doctors will keep increasing the dose, but the recommendation is to keep it at like a specific dose. I don't know what the actual number is, and that don't keep going up because that's not going to, if it's not working already, then it's not going to help you. If you keep increasing further and further and further, if you haven't seen any change. And then also when you go off of it, regardless of your dose, you have to taper. Those were the main things, was that there's a lot of misinformation.
Yes. It
can work. If it's not working, then don't keep going up and up and up if you haven't seen any change, and then taper. So that's the only tidbit.
Yeah, exactly. You need to make an educated decision when you're going to go on it and talk to your doctors. I talked to the midwife, the doctor, the lactation consultant. They all were like, yes, let's try it. And I talked to my husband about it too, because the risk if you don't taper, there's a mental health concern. And because of my history with PTSD, I was like, does it bother? Like, I just wanted his input. Like, I didn't want him to be stressing about this. But it's very normal. Like the SSRIs I'm on, I also can't just take cold turkey. Yeah. So it's normal to me that you'd have to taper medication anyway. So I'm like, I'm not really concerned that I'm just going to stop taking it, or, that wasn't a big concern of mine. Through all of this, we decided to try the domperidone, but we were only going to try it for, I think we decided 3 to 5 days, because that was from my lactation consultant. Like, you're going to see if it's working or not. It's not going to have its full effect, but you'll see an increase. So even if it's a slight increase, it means it's working. And I sure did. Like, it was probably 48 to 72 hours that I was like, oh, I definitely have more milk. Like, it was just crazy, the change. Peyton was still cluster feeding. Like, you still are doing everything the same. And it doesn't actually give you more milk. It creates more prolactin, I think is what it is. You're a nurse. You'd know this more than me. But then when baby is feeding, your body actually is turning that prolactin into milk. So it doesn't increase your milk supply. It increases the prolactin, which then by feeding and by
emptying the breast,
breastfeeding more and just like emptying your breast, then you're going to be producing more. So you can't just take it and expect it to increase. So
because at that point it's still supply and demand. You have to empty your breast to then stimulate more milk production. So if you're not emptying your breast regularly, then you're not stimulating milk production as well. So it doesn't matter if you're taking it if you're not emptying your breast. That's what you're saying, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. That is what I'm saying.
Good old supply and demand. Yep. You got to empty to tell your body to make more.
So it really worked for me. And so the lactation came and we did a feed, and the feed went beautifully. We didn't need to top up and things were going well. So she said, hey, why don't you actually just try exclusively breastfeeding? And I wanted to try, but I didn't think it was actually going to work. And I was like, you really think I should try? And she's like, go for it. Like, what's the worst that's going to happen? Like, give it 48 hours. We'll weigh her again and just see. Like, the worst thing is you top up or you have to pump or, like then we decide and we can pivot from there. Again, this is still in the first week. So we're still in my time frame. She's like, let's go for it. So
the first week of taking
I did that,
right?
It was still in the first week and maybe just over a week of after Peyton was born.
Oh, after
I started taking the domperidone, because it would have been in within week 2 that I started exclusively breastfeeding. And the weight was good. Like, the numbers were looking really good. And so I just kind of was like, hey, I'm going to continue on and just see how things go. The only unfortunate thing that has happened now since this exclusive breastfeeding is we think that she has the same cow's milk protein allergy that Jordan has. And that's based on just, her symptoms, her really mucousy poop. She's had diarrhea. just a lot of pain and gas and screaming and crying and colicky, essentially. And so I've had to cut out dairy. But since cutting out dairy, she also hasn't screamed while passing gas and hasn't cried during bowel movements. And we've seen some improvement with the colicky symptoms, and she's settling better. And so all in all, like, I don't know, we're 3.5 weeks in and I'm now still exclusively breastfeeding. I did the math. I think it's been 10 days that I've been exclusively breastfeeding or something like that now, which I never thought I would get to.
I know.
But I still give myself short time frames. Like, I'm going to reevaluate in another week or another 2 weeks. Like, I'm still not totally set that, like, this is going to work forever. This is going to be the next year of my life, because I guess I have some trauma. It just triggers me from my last experience. So I don't want to set up these unrealistic goals and say I have to breastfeed for 6 months now. Like, I'm just going to keep going. If it doesn't work anymore for physical reasons, for family reasons, for, like our lifestyle, then I will pivot and I will change and I will do a combo of feeding, or, then I'll pivot then. But for now, I'm going to just keep going and see what happens. It's hard. So like you said, it can be easy for some people, but I think in my experience from talking to a lot of moms, that a lot of people have some sort of barrier, whether or not it's oversupply, undersupply, latch, tongue ties. We didn't have a tongue tie this time, and I think that made a huge difference. She was actually able to latch effectively right away, and I think that set us off on the right direction huge again. Like, the key things I think were starting in the hospital right away with the hand expression, skin to skin, feeding, that she didn't have a tongue tie. We got a good latch right away. Like, she naturally just could latch, which is very, very nice. And then I had support and had people that were helping me along the way and then trying that. But, most people have some sort of barrier they have to overcome. And it's really common. And if people are telling you it's easy, just ignore them.
Yeah, because it's not.
It is not.
Yeah.
And even if physically it's not bad, it can be mentally draining.
So
because you're just being touched all the time. Like, you can be touched out, or you just don't enjoy it. And then people feel bad for not enjoying this thing they're supposed to enjoy, that they're bonding with their child, but they actually hate it. And so then that mentally plays a picture. Like, there's just so many different things that could be going on. So it's okay if you hate it. It's okay if breastfeeding didn't work. If you're trying it again, like, it's
very hard. And I want to say, if your breastfeeding journey or feeding journey in general did not go the way that you planned, like, first, I'm sorry. And that you also have to grieve it. Like, it is a loss for some people, especially some people have dreamt about breastfeeding forever. Like, some people are very attached to wanting to do it, like, for their own reasons. For some people, it's the, like, shame of it not working. For some people, it's just something that they really want to do for bonding. And whatever your reason is, well, one, don't feel shamed if it doesn't work. We'll get more into that later. But if it didn't go the way that you planned, like, I'm sorry. And then I also want to say, I've made a reel about this a while ago about why I don't actually like the saying fed is best. And I've said it before. And then when I really reflected on the meaning behind it, it just, like, kind of made me sad. So both Jen and I feel very strongly that you feed your baby however works for you, however works for your family, whether that's formula feeding by bottle, whether that's breast milk by bottle, by just feeding at the boob, or a combination of all of that. That is not at all why I don't like the saying. The reason I don't like the saying is because when you just kind of reduce it to, like, oh, well, fed is best, just feed your baby, you're not acknowledging the, like, grief and loss that someone can feel when their breastfeeding journey doesn't go as planned. So by just saying, oh, well, like, just feed your baby, like, you're not really validating that this is, like, a difficult decision or a difficult journey for somebody. It's almost like you're, like, minimizing it to, well, it's just food, like, it, but it represents so much more than that. And maybe some of the things we allow breastfeeding to represent, we need to shift away from that, because it doesn't represent whether you're, like, your ability to be a good mom or your ability to connect. But some people really do deeply feel that. So maybe that is something we shift away from, but I think we still need to acknowledge that if somebody's feeding journey doesn't go the way that they planned, by just saying fed is best as a way to support somebody, you might actually be invalidating their struggles and their grief. Does that make sense?
Totally. I I agree. My experience wholeheartedly impacted this experience. So my experience with my first child did impact my experience that I've been having now, like negatively, because it didn't go well and I didn't grieve it. I was just like, oh, I was always fine with whatever happened. Like, fed is best. That's kind of what I always thought. And then this time I'm like, oh, this is affecting me now. Like mentally, it was really hard on me and it was triggering me. And even my lactation consultant was like, I can see this is triggering for you. Like, I think your experience with Jordan is really affecting you right now. And I was like, yes, it is. And it's because I was just like, oh, she's fed. It's fine. Like, it didn't work out, whatever. Like, I was sad about it, but I didn't grieve it at all. And then now it's coming up. The sentiment that people mean behind it is true. Like, however you can feed your child is good. But yes, I can understand. I totally get what you're saying.
The intention of that is not actually for some people how it's perceived. So I wrote a little note here of like, what would I say instead? And I think instead, something that you can say is like acknowledging that it was a loss and saying, I'm sorry it didn't go as planned. And it's okay to be sad that breastfeeding didn't work out, whether like if they're pumping and they're sad that they're pumping, if they're sad that they're just bottle feeding, and just acknowledging that it's something that was hard for them and giving them that like opportunity and space to be sad. And then also reminding them that like your worth as a mom is not correlated with how you feed your baby, and you're doing a great job. Your baby's lucky to have you. And, you know, just reminding them that this doesn't mean they're a failure, because at the end of the day, it's not a mom that is failing breastfeeding. It's society failing moms who are trying to breastfeed. Moms take the burden of that guilt and we carry it, but really it's our world. Like, our world is not set up to support breastfeeding moms. And even Jen saying that her nurse was hand expressing for her is like so unheard of, because nurses usually don't have time for that. And it's so sad because we don't have time in our jobs to support moms with breastfeeding. And then moms go home and then they're the ones that are feeling upset that they weren't able to be successful, but it's not them. And research shows that stimulating your breast within the first hour has the greatest effect on your milk supply, the greatest impact on your milk supply for your entire journey. So your milk supply at 6 months is dictated by how much you were stimulated in that first hour. So this came up at work again the other day, and I'm like, well, then why aren't we hand express? Like, why aren't the patients hand expressing in recovery? And the lactation consultant was like, well, it's the system. And so it just shows that your milk supply was drastically different. Even before you took the domperidone, you were still getting significantly more. And one of the main things you changed, like, yes, you latched early, but you hand expressed at that before that hour, ideally the second by hour 2, and even stimulating by 6 hours still makes an impact. But that first hour is so important. You were latching frequently in the beginning because Peyton was able to. So many moms struggle with breastfeeding, especially when it's with supply, and like, it's not their fault because it's the system.
Yeah. There's two things that I want to add to this too, because I read it recently on Instagram. And I thought it was a very interesting point. Like, the world doesn't shame you if you need glasses. Like, if your eyes don't work perfectly and you need glasses, the world doesn't shame you for that. But if your milk supply doesn't come in and it isn't this like huge supply that can feed your baby, why are we shaming that? Like, yes, your body doesn't always work the way it was meant to work. Yes, you have a baby and your milk supply comes in and you feed your baby with that. Sure, that's kind of how our bodies are supposed to work. But our bodies never work as they're supposed to. Almost everyone has something in their body that doesn't work exactly how they planned or how it was designed. And we don't shame them for all of these other things. There's so many out there that never get shamed because of it. Glasses is just an easy one to give the example for. So why are we shaming people for this if their breastfeeding journey doesn't work? Like, it's sad to me that, yes, because it has to do with women having babies, there's shame attached to it. Whereas if breastfeeding had to do with something else, there wouldn't be shame. It totally has to do with this, because it has to do with women having babies.
And that's our role, and that's our purpose. And if we can't fulfill that, then we're failing as, the perfect moms that we're supposed to be. And that's a whole other episode.
Yes. And I also wanted to touch on that your milk supply, there's genetic factors that come into play. And I do have some of them, but your body just might not be designed, and you might have a few things genetically going on to give you this great milk supply. And my mom and sister both couldn't really breastfeed. And so I was like, it makes sense that maybe I don't, but I never really looked into why. And now I've looked into it a bit more and I was like, okay, it makes sense. We have a lot of hormonal diagnoses, diseases, I don't know, whatever you want to call it, but we have a lot going on, PCOS, endometriosis. A lot of those things can affect your milk supply.
And the main thing there is it can affect the amount of glandular tissue you have in your breast. So size of breast doesn't actually have any correlation with milk supply. It has to do with the amount of glandular tissue you have in there. So not the fatty tissue, the actual glandular tissue, which increases when you're pregnant. And with every pregnancy, you actually grow more. And then that is what is affected by early and frequent stimulation. So part of it is for sure a genetic link. If your mom and sister both struggled with breastfeeding and supply, like there has to be a correlation there with genetics.
We all have PCOS and endometriosis. Yes. Like it makes sense now knowing that. Yeah.
And PCOS is related to, or it's linked with hypoplasia, meaning you don't have enough of the glandular tissue that grows. So hypo meaning less. So those are the people that when they take domperidone will not get any benefits. Like they won't have any changes in it because if there's no glandular tissue, you can't, like, doesn't matter what you take if you can't
make that. Yes.
If you don't got the glandular tissue, you can't will your way into making more breast milk. It would be like a guy trying to lactate. We should try that.
I mean, and I did eat some of those lactation cookies that we got, but he didn't get a milk supply, guys, so it didn't work.
You know why?
Don't try it. I was actually mad.
Stimulating within that first hour. That's it.
Do men have glandular tissue? No.
I don't think so.
Okay.
No.
So he was doomed from the start.
Now I'm curious. I don't think they have any. Like they have breast tissue, but now I want to know. Men have glandular.
I'm just curious.
Breast tissue. I mean, like maybe they have. No. Oh, it contains no lobules. So they don't have the capacity to, we talked about kind of like your experience with breastfeeding. We kind of went on a couple little good tangents there. Let's talk about what you actually need to be successful. So we have 5 tips. But before that, let's just list out some of the things that social media, society, in-laws, friends, people say that you absolutely need to be successful.
That you need the most expensive pump that there is. And you need the most expensive wearable pump too. You don't need just one pump. You need all the pumps because you need one that you can travel with, one you can have at home. And they are expensive. Like,
and you have to put it on your registry and get it before you even know if you're going to breastfeed, because that's what society tells you have to do. So yeah, hot tip. You don't need one on your registry because you might never use it. Another thing, fancy nursing clothes. I just wear t-shirts. And like, sure, some of the ones with like the little holes and slits can be helpful, but I found just t-shirts that I could either like pull down or pull up. That was the most helpful for me.
I just get naked so far. I'm just like everything from waist up just comes off to breastfeed. And that's just the easiest thing. So in the beginning, you don't need to be spending all this money before baby's here buying all this stuff. Like see how it goes and see what's happening. Like all the extras, like the Hackas, the Ladybug, the manual pump. Like you just don't know what you're going to need.
And all of those
There's
things
a lot of extras
on Amazon. You can get at Walmart or whatever your big box store is within, like you can get them all within an hour. Like unless you live somewhere super rural, all of these things are things that you can get very easily. And then
I wouldn't spend all the money getting
this. Because you don't know if you need it. Then on that same note, like you don't need bottles just in case. Like you don't need to have formula at home just in case. If you want to and that makes you feel less stressed coming home, then yeah, for sure, have that. But you don't need to. Like I've seen people put on their registry the like 5-pack of different bottles for like to test the different ones out. It's so expensive. It's like $70 or something outrageous. And maybe you will need that and you will have to try all these different bottles to see what your baby will take. But also maybe they'll take the first bottle you give them. And then talking about bottles and pumps, you also don't need a freezer stash. So if you're going to be returning to work, you know, if you're not living in Canada and you're returning to work after a couple of weeks, or if part of your plan is to be leaving the house frequently for whatever reason, then maybe you do.
For long periods of time too.
Yeah. For most people, they don't actually need a freezer stash. Some people just end up having a freezer stash if they have an oversupply. But if you're one of those people who thinks that at the end of the day, you have to sit and pump to build a freezer supply, you don't need that. And like, if you are exclusively breastfeeding, there's a chance that your baby at one point won't take bottles because it's a skill. You have to give a bottle frequently for them to keep taking it after they lose their suck reflex. So a lot of people feel this like deep urge to make or to have a giant freezer stash and then they never actually get to use it, which is sad.
I know people that's happened to. Another one is all of the breastfeeding pillows that are out there. There's a million of them, and
you don't need all of them.
They're expensive. They're not cheap. I bought one and never really ended up using it for my first, so I'm using it now, which is great. Again, lots of these things are on Marketplace.
I had multiple that when Henry came, I didn't actually like any of them. So then I went out and actually bought the My Breastfriend that we actually both have used because that is the one that I wanted. So part of me was like, I should have just waited to see how breastfeeding was going, how big your baby is, do you need it, and then get one after you know actually kind of what's going on once you figure out what positions you actually like feeding in. But I do say that My Breastfriend, for us, we both loved it because you can clip it and it just seemed to be easier. And then finishing our note here of what society tells us we need, also nursing covers. Do you eat under a blanket? I don't. So I don't know
either,
why.
and I've never bought a nursing cover. Like I said, just tarps off. Everything's just coming off.
Exactly.
And you come over, you're seeing boobs. That's just reality.
It's just part of the visit. And also they're just boobs. They're actually how your child's feeding. So they're, not that exciting. Sorry. But I mean, sure. Maybe if you were dancing on a table, that'd be different. But if you're just feeding your child, it's just a snack. Yeah. And also, you don't actually have to cover your baby in public. Legally, we are protected by law that you can breastfeed anywhere. If you want to cover to just latch baby and that makes you more comfortable, then you can do that. But you don't actually need a breastfeeding cover to do that. So now that we're talking about supplies, there are a few supplies that we actually really liked. And most of these actually aren't things that we even bought before baby. They're things that came up after and we realized, hey, let's add this in. So why don't we quickly go through those?
A nursing station. Like having somewhere that you are set up in your house, that you have your phone charger, snacks, because you're going to be hangry, water, entertainment, like your TV, your iPad, whatever, computer, phone, something, you want to be able to sit there comfortably for probably half an hour. So you need to have these things kind of at the ready. And included in that, it's a water bottle, a big water bottle with a straw so that it's easy to drink from while you're breastfeeding and it can hold a lot of water. So you stay hydrated and you don't have to get up while you're breastfeeding to get more water.
And I had one
station, key.
Set up in multiple areas. I had one in our bed. So on our bedside table, I had all of these things. And then I also had one set up in the living room so that when you do sit down and you latch baby and you're feeding and then you're not like, crap, like I'm hungry or, my phone's dying or I don't have headphones or an iPad or whatever. So set yourself up because you're going to spend a lot of time feeding. We talked about, we both liked the My Breastfriend pillow. I actually got mine after we had Henry because I didn't like the other one that I had. So that's not something you have to bring. You don't have to have that right away because you can just use regular pillows to figure out what position you like to feed in. And then from there, decide if you want to invest in a pillow and if you actually need one.
We both liked the Medela pump. So they recommend using a hospital grade pump if you have kind of any concerns with breastfeeding.
Like supply issues, yeah.
But you can rent them, which is the coolest thing. And lots of places actually have them. I would just check to see like where locally has them, just so you know. But I was able to just call one the day we got home and they had one in stock. And so then my husband went and got it. I didn't know that was a thing until having kids. I was like, oh, that's actually really cool that you can rent a pump.
And then even for buying them, unless you're buying the hospital grade one, which nobody buys them, you just rent them. If you are buying them, there are also something you can buy like same day. Like everywhere sells pumps, like London Drugs, Walmart, any big pharmacy, they sell them. Best Buy, Amazon. And the thing with a pump, that if you are pumping for supply, like for stimulation, you want a double electric pump that plugs into the wall, and that will give you like the most stimulation. There's lots out there. And then, this is one that I had actually that Jen laughed at me for. And now that she's nursing Peyton, she's realized this is actually important. I had a pillow in the backseat of my car because, like we talked about, this world is not set up to support breastfeeding parents. And there's been many times that we were out and about and I had to feed Henry in the car because he needed quiet and he didn't nurse well in really busy places. So as much as like I didn't care about nursing in public, it was that he needed the quiet. So now Jen has had a few moments where she's like, crap, I wish I had a pillow. So a pillow in your backseat.
Like, and I laughed at Karlee. I laughed at this, and now I'm like, genius. This was genius. I was using like jackets we had and try to stack those because in the beginning, when they don't have their neck strength, you really have to support them. And I'm still like hand massaging while she's feeding a lot of the times because we're still new in this journey. So it requires a lot of work and effort. And so we're just not there that we can easily just pop on and sit there without any support. We're not there. Genius to have a pillow in the car.
Try it out. Yeah. Because you also, in a car, if you're in the back seat, you can't lean back at all. And depending on the size of your car, usually the front seat's pretty small. And if you can't lean back, it is just nice having a little pillow. So that's my hot tip. Yeah, and snacks. And a water bottle in your car. Yeah, I use it a lot.
I take back all the laughs. So here's what we have from both of our experiences found to actually make a successful feeding journey. Like we said in the beginning, they might be a bit different. They're not your usual.
These are hot tips from moms who have struggled. And also moms who've struggled with mental health. There's, like Jen said, this isn't really like stuff, but the focus of these tips are on education, mindset, support. We have 5, like we've broken it down into 5 different sections. And this is like what has worked for us. And this is if anybody asked me, hey, I want to breastfeed, what are your best tips? This is actually what I would say.
Totally. This first one I never would have thought of. Never would have. And I actually think it's one of the biggest game changers if you want to breastfeed. And it is prenatal breastfeeding education. Actually learning about it and looking into it. And there's courses that you can do out there. There's classes that you can do. And actually knowing and learning about how it's going to go. I think that is the biggest game changer.
That's the biggest. Yeah. That's the thing I see the most in the hospital when people come in postpartum. They don't understand how, and no fault of their own, like we don't normalize breastfeeding enough in society. We don't just do it around people. We don't talk about it a lot. So people don't understand normal newborn behaviors. So sleeping long stretches, sleeping through the night, like that is not a normal newborn behavior. We don't understand the importance of early stimulation. Like Jen was talking about, she was hand expressing her nurse was hand expressing for her. Amazing in the first hour. And that
skin to skin.
Yes, skin to skin. And
feeding
that milk production
is on demand. Yeah.
Yes, is it's a supply and demand. If you're not emptying your breast, then you're not signaling to your body to make more. And then part of this plan, when you do the education, you can learn about what do I need to do if I'm separated from baby? Hint, stimulation. And then when is topping up, so giving either bottles of breast milk, of like donor milk, your own breast milk you have extra of, or formula, like when is topping up actually medically indicated and when is it necessary? So there are times that it actually is really important, but also going back to understanding normal newborn behaviors. Your baby cluster feeding is not a sign that they need more. They're helping to try to bring your milk in. And a lot of parents interpret this as them not getting enough. Same with like crying. People think that baby crying means, oh, they have to be hungry. Like babies cry for so many reasons. Maybe their big toe is itchy and they don't know how to tell you that, you know? So that just goes into like learning about breastfeeding, either through a course, asking your friends who've breastfed, asking to watch them breastfeed, asking them, you know, like the stuff that like when we think of other cultures and other countries that normalize breastfeeding and breastfeed in front of others. Imagine having a baby when you've seen every family member, every friend breastfeed. They've talked about it. You know, be a whole other world.
It's not this taboo topic.
Exactly. Yeah. And then also on that is being comfortable with your own body and handling your own breasts. So actually touching your breasts, learning about your nipples. What do they look like? How to hand express. If you're cleared by your provider, starting to hand express at 37 weeks and practicing touching them. Because the hardest thing when you have this baby, which if you've never had a baby, like handling a newborn is so scary. And then you're also trying to figure out how to touch your own body and do those two things together. Like it's like juggling while you're on stilts. Like that's impossible. And that's what breastfeeding is like in the beginning.
And knowing that it might, your nipples also might be sore, and you like knowing also what things to look for mastitis, clogged ducts, or cracked nipples. If you end up bleeding, like these things can happen and these things do come up. What are they? What should you do to actually know and have a little bit of knowledge going into it is
so important.
Yes, it's going to night and day. It'll change your experience. And the first time didn't do enough of this.
That's number one.
So
number two,
prenatal education. I would say leave the nursery and focus on this. Like the nursery, you don't need right away. The bassinet in the bedroom, cool. You don't need your painted nursery with all your fun things on the walls. If you have time, great. But if you have time, do prenatal breastfeeding education and sleep and know about what is normal for a newborn and these first few months. because it is wild, I tell you.
And if you're breastfeeding and you have a friend having a baby, you can, like, I've never really thought of this, but like you can say, hey, do you ever, if you have questions or you want to watch breastfeeding or anything, like, let's make it normal. Let's just start a parade. We'll all just be breastfeeding. And if you're not breastfeeding, you can just have your tits out and we'll just, it's going to be great. Stay tuned for that.
Honestly, I laughed so much about Karlee's boobs being out all the time and like answering the door with boobs out. But now that I'm boobs out all the time, I'm like,
you get it.
I get it. I'm going to be that person. I'm the naked neighbor now because
you're the naked neighbor.
When you're breastfeeding, it's just easier.
And it also, you're just used to it.
Yes, that you don't notice. You forget your boobs are out because they're just out all the time now. Totally. I never understood this. It's also new to me this time. It's mind blowing.
It's like if you never have your top off, like a little gust of wind, you realize, oh, I'm naked. But when your boobs are always out, like a little gust of wind is just normal. So you don't even realize that like you're naked. So
yes, going back to education, there's lots of things that have to do with latching and how to latch your baby, and knowing that before you actually have the baby born is important. I find it very interesting to know, and maybe this is getting into too much detail, but like there's easy signs to see on your nipples if the latch was okay or not. And like if you're bleeding and you're getting like different shapes, they mean different things, and it can help you kind of figure out a better latch and position.
Yeah. You mean like the shape of the nipple when baby comes off, right? Yeah.
When baby comes off, yes. Knowing some of these things ahead of time and knowing what to look for is super helpful.
And then also on that too, if you have breastfed, but the last time you breastfed was a toddler, reviewing latching a newborn, because it's so different. People will come in and they just like whip their boob out and expect their baby to find it. And then you have to remind them like, oh, but you're breastfeeding that baby like a toddler. Like it's different. Yeah. So you have to like retrain your brain to go back to breastfeed the tiniest baby. So that's another one too. So let's get back to number 2, support in those first few weeks. So this can be from a health professional. We both worked with midwives and lactation consultants. Public health nurses, depending on where you work or where you live, can also help you. Can also be like peer support. Like I said, mom friends who have breastfed, like they are a wealth of knowledge in the basics. So like obviously if you have a complex case, you need somebody else. But most breastfeeding challenges just need support and encouragement. So that brings me to the third kind of support, just moral support. So breastfeeding is such a mental battle, and just having somebody to remind you like, yes, this is hard. Like you're learning, baby is learning, and you struggling doesn't mean you're a bad mom. And just having somebody remind you that, because as Jen can share, like the mental battle is the hardest part for so many of us.
And even my lactation consultant, she said that she sees a lot of patients and a lot of them are actually doing really well. And she'll be like, I don't know why you needed to see me. And a lot of it, she's like, it's almost like I'm a counselor. Like it comes up so often, the mindset and how to be positive. And they need someone to be watching them, telling them it's working and it looks good, so that they can be like, okay, I'm doing the right thing. Like a lot of people just need someone that's cheering them on, telling them they're doing a good job, like saying, yep, your baby is latched and getting milk. Like they need those reassurances. And that was really interesting to me. She's like, yeah, there's people that, need help and their latches and tongue ties and supply. And, I really needed a lactation consultant to help me, but I also need her to just cheer me on and tell me it's working. Yeah. And I'm still going to see her this week, even though it's going okay, because I still need the support from
the reassurance. For sure. And it's hard because those first few weeks of breastfeeding, no matter how easy your journey is, they're still so hard and there's so much doubt and you're still like, you don't know if what you're doing is right because every baby's so different and there's no right or wrong way. And well, I mean, there are wrong ways. There's no, like every baby is different and how you're doing it is different than somebody else, how they're doing it. And that is hard. So you just need somebody to remind you like, yes, those first few weeks are going to be so hard, but then it does get easier. You just need someone cheering for you.
Totally. You need someone in your corner.
So let's chat number 3. You take this one, Jen.
Number 3 is the mindset shifts. And for me, this was huge because I went in and I really wanted to try exclusively breastfeeding, but I really had to make sure I told myself beforehand, like, okay, I am going to try this. If this doesn't work, there are other options. It doesn't mean I'm a failure. I can there's combo feeding. I could do breastfeeding and bottle feeding. And actually, Karlee had to remind me of this a few times already that like, hey, you don't need to do it all. You don't need to be the hero that only breastfeeds. And even my lactation consultant said the same thing. She's like, maybe now that you've done it for a couple days and like, here, gold star, you exclusively breastfed. She's like, you might hate it and not want to do it. And then all of those thoughts I had of like, I need to do this, all just would crumble away. And she's like, a lot of people get too, in their mind that I have to breastfeed it. I have to do this one way.
Another big mindset shift that's important is people become, like Jen said, fixated on like being the hero and just exclusively breastfeeding. And they feel like it's like this badge of honor if they can do that. Like you're not a better mom if you can. Yeah, sure. If that's your goal, that's great if you can meet that. But that doesn't mean that you're like in air quotes better. And you're not weak, like Jen said, if you have to change your feeding plan. But an important thing with mindset as well is that people tell us that if you want to breastfeed, you can't use a soother, you can't use a bottle, you can't formula feed, you have to co-sleep. And changing our mindset that if those things are going to make our lives so much easier and also in the long run help us actually breastfeed if that's what we want, then yes, add them. One of the only reasons that we were able to eventually latch and exclusively feed from the breast instead of pumping and bottle feeding was using soothers, because Henry was such a sucker, he loved to suck and he needed that. And if we didn't use a soother, I don't think I would have been able to breastfeed because it was such a tool that I needed. But people told me, if you want to breastfeed, you can't use a soother. So just changing your mindset. Yes, changing that mindset. Like, what is actually going to happen if I do that? So that brings us into number 4, and Jen's going to continue on what she was saying, is evaluation. So
yes, is evaluation that, that you might need to change your plans and that is okay, right? That's a big mindset thing. Like, this is my goal, but if that doesn't work out, I can pivot, I can change. And my biggest piece of advice here for this evaluation is to have short little time frames that you are reevaluating in. Don't give yourself I need to breastfeed for X amount of months and then I will see how it's going. Then I'll do a mental check-in. Well, no, that's way too long. Like, you need to be doing these check-ins to see how things are going. And that includes physically and mentally, relationships. Like, how is it working in your family? I checked in with my husband and I was like, how are you okay? Like, yes, I'm exclusively breastfeeding now. He was big into wanting to switch to formula because of my mental health and because of how it went last time. He didn't want to go through that again. And so I checked in with him and I said, how are you doing? Like, okay, we hit the 2-week mark. This is where we're at now. Let's continue. Let's not. And he, of course, gives me his opinion and always says, it's your body, your choice. And he's very like, it's me. So he's like, I can make this decision. But I like to get his input too when I'm evaluating and checking in with kind of like impartial people in your life, whether, like Karlee said, that's your healthcare provider, which is good, a close friend, a spouse, someone that can be impartial and to see you and how you are doing to tell you if it's actually doing okay or not. Because I think that so many moms will just bypass their own feelings and their own needs to just be like, no, I have to do this. And they'll basically drive themselves into the ground feeding their child, and there'll be nothing left of them. They will be mentally and physically just done, and that they think they have to do that. But let me tell you, like, killing yourself to feed your child is not actually good. Like, that's not a good place to be in, because you might resent your child. You may forget about the rest of your family and resent your other children and not be able to see them. Like, you could create a terrible connection with your child because you hate when they are touching you. Like, it can get bad.
Yeah.
Why would you do that to yourself? Like, you just need to reevaluate, and you need to check
breast
in.
Is best. Hey. Sorry. That's a joke, clearly.
Well, I had a nice old white doctor tell me that a few weeks ago, and I was like, cool, thank you. I know that already.
Ugh, but it's not happy. Yeah. Poo on them.
Yes.
And like you said, like, evaluating is so important. Like, is this actually working? Like, if I continue breastfeeding, is this what is best for the connection and bonding between me and my baby? Like, is breastfeeding helping
resentment
or
is a thing.
My connection? Oh, 100%. And then also, like, what's best for your family, like you said, and like your own mental health. The mom has to consider, like, if I continue breastfeeding, is that going to be better or worse for my mental health? Because in some cases, yeah, sure, maybe you just need a little bit more support, a couple more, maybe some tweaks, and then to help you kind of get over that hump. But in some cases, like, no, you just need to stop or change the plan. Maybe you add in bottles. Maybe you add in pumping. It doesn't have to be like breastfeed or not breastfeed. There also is this huge area in between of mixed feeding.
Honestly, with Jordan, I could not see. I could not see clearly at all. And I needed someone to tell me, stop triple feeding, and I didn't get that. And this time I feel a lot more clarity around it and around the evaluation, but it's because I went in with this plan of I'm going to reevaluate. I'm going to do the 2 weeks. I'm going to see, okay, after 2 weeks, I said, I'm giving it to Wednesday, and then I'll see on Wednesday, then we'll reevaluate. And I, had these plans. I had support persons set up that knew about the plans and kind of had this in place before the baby was even here. And I think that helped me to remain a bit more like mentally clear about, is this working or not?
Yeah.
So again, it's that prep work before baby's even here that comes into play. That's super important.
Yeah. And your evaluation isn't, like I said, it's not whether or not you're going to stop breastfeeding. It's whether or not this is working. And if it is not if it's not working, what can I change to make it work better for me? And that's not always just stopping breastfeeding. Like there's such a in-between area of what other things that you can do and other tools you can add in. And the frequent evaluation, that's important. And that brings us to number 5. So this is an exit strategy and a plan, like a long-term plan of how to maintain your sanity while also breastfeeding. So Jen shared that with her first, that she was triple feeding and doing that for way too long. So if there's if you're struggling with breastfeeding and you have to add in some kind of tool to help you get there. So whether that's triple feeding, whether that's pumping exclusively and bottle feeding, whether that's trying something like a medication, there's other things you can do where you like room in and like stay in bed with baby for an entire 24-hour period. I can't remember the name of it, but that is a tool to help with breastfeeding as well when baby's quite young.
Like power pumping hours and
power
lots
pumping.
Of different things.
There's different approaches. Like there's ones for supply, there's ones for latching. So the one of like staying in bed for 24 hours, like for some people that sounds like a dream. Some people that sounds like a nightmare. But anyways, whatever your tactic, whatever your tool is, like you need a plan. Like how long am I going to do this? When am I going to reevaluate? And if this is not working, like at what point am I going to decide that I need to stop? So this one kind of is like segues from evaluation, but also knowing that like you do need to have like an exit strategy if it's not working for you.
Knowing kind of what options that you are open to. And with my first, I didn't use domperidone, and I knew going into it that I was going to be more open to it this time if it came to that. And it did. And I already kind of knew in my head, I think I'll give it a try this time. But again, I had a time frame that I was going to try it for, and I knew, hey, if it didn't get better in X amount of days, then I'm going to do X, Y, and Z, and then I'm going to change to this. I'm going to stop taking the medication. Like, right, you have these plans. So knowing ahead of time kind of what you're willing to do or try and for really how long is important.
For sure. And like maybe that means you're only going to breastfeed at nighttime or during the day, and then you'll use bottles the other time. Maybe that means you're going to source out like a peer source of breast milk, like a peer donated breast milk from somebody you know or somebody that you find online. Like maybe there's in betweens. It's not just like either you breastfeed from the breast or you only give bottles of formula. Like there's an in between, and there's so many other options in there. But
all that gray area. It's made out to be black or white, and it is actually so gray. In reality, most people are in that gray area.
For sure.
There's not a ton that are in the black or white.
Very few. Very few. And also another thing we didn't mention with mindset shift is reminding yourself and maybe people in your support group that breastfeeding is not free. So maybe, you don't have to purchase breastfeeding, but it's not free if you're considering the mom's mental health and well-being. It's also not free if you consider the like time, like mom's time that they're breastfeeding. And then also like the extra food and clothes and extra additional things that moms need. Well, some not. You don't all need supplies, but if there are things that you need, and if you're pumping, like that costs money. So breastfeeding is absolutely not free when we consider mom's mental health, when we consider their time, and when we also consider the extra things that you need for breastfeeding. So that's another big thing to consider, that if you don't want to switch to breastfeeding or switch to formula just because it costs money, like you are worth whatever that cost is. And like, sure, it is expensive. It's an extra burden if you are already struggling financially, which most people of childbearing age these days are. But just knowing that like your mental health is worth so much more.
It would be actually interesting to see if you calculated all of the actual supplies you needed to breastfeed, because even if you rent a pump, you still need to purchase the kits to go with them. that you're going to have to pump into bottles. So you still do need some bottles. The bags that you're going to store it in, because people do get it in their head, they need this freezer supply. And those bags, like those aren't cheap to get that. You're going to get the nipple cream. You're going to get the colostrum collectors. You're going to get I'd be curious to see how much it actually all adds up to, because there's a ton of stuff, all of these extras, the hackas, the people end up buying to breastfeed. So it isn't free if you actually look at it like just logistically either.
Yeah.
So mentally and financially, like it's not free.
I hope that like if breastfeeding is your goal and that is something that you want, that like I really hope that you are able to, because it is so beautiful and wonderful when it's going well, and it's so awful and devastating when it's not going well. And I've been on both ends of that. So I hope that you can take like some of those 5 tips and use that to help make your breastfeeding journey or your feeding journey go however you want.
It's not to say that if it's hard, you can't keep pushing and you can't keep trying new things. So we're not saying if it's hard and you're having hard days to give up either, to just give it all up in formula feed. That's how I feel.
You will have hard days.
You will have hard. It is going to be hard, and it is going to be just what you're going to have those moments of, I should just formulas, bottles going to be easier. Like I can't do this. And it is okay to keep pushing yourself. It's just, there needs to be a limit to how far you're going to do that. So just please don't think we're saying if it ever gets hard, just stop, because it's going to be hard.
There's challenges when they're newborns and trying to latch them when they're sleepy and you're learning how to latch. Then there's challenges when they start taking in the world around them and all they want to do is look around and they don't want to feed. Then there's challenges when they get teeth and they start biting. And then there's challenges when they're teething and they don't want to nurse or they only want to nurse. Like there's challenges the whole time, and breastfeeding can be very difficult. And we're definitely not saying if it's hard, give up, because it will be hard, but it does get easier and you do actually get to enjoy it, hopefully at some point. If you're not enjoying it, then go back, reevaluate.
Exit plan, know what you'd go to next.
We're going to lose Jen here. She's got to bounce. She's got a baby who needs her boobies. So I just wanted to wrap up some reminders that we wrote out here. It's okay to struggle. Like it's okay if it's hard. Breastfeeding may be natural, but it doesn't always come naturally. And there's a huge learning curve for mom and baby. And then also you're not weak if breastfeeding is hard. That, like we said, it's hard. And your ability to breastfeed does not correlate with your ability to be a good mom. And I think a lot of us moms carry that if we're not able to breastfeed or if it's not easy for us, then it means that we're not like cut out to do this or we're not made to do this. That is absolutely not true. Back to that first point of it being hard and it's okay to struggle. Like it's okay to keep pushing through when it's hard. And it's also okay to stop if it's hard and it's not working for you. So pretty much all we're saying is like, you do you, boo. We hope that your breastfeeding or your feeding journey goes how you want it to. And I'm sorry if it doesn't. If you're struggling in your journey, just remember that like any amount of breast milk that you're giving is great. And you should celebrate that, whether they're getting a few drops that you hand express every day or you're breastfeeding exclusively. If you're not giving any breast milk, like that's okay too. Like your love is the most important thing. Anyways, you're doing a great job. We're going to end it there. Jen is off tending to the baby and we're going to pick up again next week. So happy Mom Day. Thanks for tuning in and have a lovely day.